Good afternoon, all. Thank you so much for joining us again here on the next installment of the Spring and Nature Black Employees Network Speaker Series. I'm delighted to say that we are joined here today by Dr. Nehemiah Mabry. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
No worries at all. How's things been in the chaotic world that we are in at the moment? How are things with you?
Man, I think, Marlene, things have been pretty good for the most part. Just staying positive, staying safe as much as possible. And, the show must go on, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a weird one, especially for science, obviously with the situation we're in at the moment. So
Indeed.
yeah, it's a weird one.
Yeah.
It's a weird one.
Indeed.
So I've got a few questions for you, as you can imagine. I just wanted to kind of take a deep dive into you and into your background. And you've got so many different layers to your professional career. So this question is going to be quite an open question for you.
Okay.
And the first question is, how long have you been doing what you're doing? And because I know you've been doing so many different things,
Yeah.
can you kind of bring us down into kind of give us a kind of in deep dive into what you're doing, your professional career, what you're in charge of, and what the future of your business is?
Sure. So the title I like to go with is structural engineer. I mean, that's where I'm professionally licensed, and that's where I am also a trained in terms of educational background. But I've been doing this really since high school, believe it or not.
Wow.
So at my age, that was, I'll say roughly 15 years ago, or so. I was a part of a NASA research apprenticeship program when I was in high school, and that was my introduction to engineering in general. And what that happened to do was open up my eyes so much so that I said, "Bring me back next year. I want to volunteer." So I came back like the following summer and volunteered, and I was really invested as I headed into college in this field called engineering. And so I spent maybe the first 8 years of my career at NASA Marshall Space Flight Center, which is in Huntsville, Alabama, in the United States. And there I just really got involved, particularly in this area called structural health monitoring. So this is the process by which we monitor the health and the condition of structures and make sure we can monitor the deterioration over time using embedded sensors and things of that nature. So I enjoyed my time at NASA so much that I decided to go all the way and get a PhD in the area of structural engineering and mechanics. And that led me to a different state, North Carolina, where I attended North Carolina State University. And from there, I was able to get more understanding, gain an expertise in a material known as fiber reinforced polymer composites. And that led me into a new career, or a slightly different structural engineering career, of bridge design. And so I've been in bridge design for the past 7.5 years. And my role in this facet has been, designing, analyzing, and inspecting bridges. And I love it.
I bet. And that is a lot of responsibility, isn't it? Because structure is huge.
Yes.
And it's such an important space. And I know that in terms of your career, one of the things that really stood out to me was you're the CEO and founder of STEMedia Incorporated.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure, gladly. One of the things I think is so important when one is building their career is to have self-awareness and to know not only what they are good at, but what motivates them, what inspires them, what keeps them going. And for me, it has not only been the technical aspects of my job as an engineer, but really the empowerment of people, inspiring people, elevating people. And so I really decided to find an outlet for this when I was pursuing my PhD. Through videos and outreach programs that was initially like a personal extracurricular activity, I would say. But over time, people started to notice and say, "Hey, can you make a video for our after school program? Can you do something for this STEM marketing campaign?" And so that led to the founding of a company, a media company called STEMedia, as you mentioned. And we provide educational, inspirational content for the STEM community. And so it has grown over the years, been able to connect with other individuals to an online platform, STEMedia.com, where We provide on-demand videos and also events, speaking events, workshops of that nature to help empower STEM careers. And we also have a particular interest in the elevation of underrepresented people, meaning
Mhm,
Black and Brown and
mhm,
Indigenous communities. And so that's
mhm.
something we've been able to be very, very active in the virtual space as well as offline. And I'm just really, really passionate about it. So much I can't wait to do in that realm that I'm really getting excited just talking about it.
I can see the enthusiasm, and literally, I think that is we're going to come on to that later on in the conversation,
Sure.
definitely, because this is a real big talking point for the rest of the information. But I could definitely see you just lit up just now speaking about
Yeah,
how to, help the community, get different people involved, especially people that particularly maybe don't get representation as well as they should. Black and brown people, it's evident, the statistics are out there.
absolutely.
Unfortunately, the representation is not great. Um,
Yes.
that then leads me on to my next question, actually. Um, what would you say would be maybe kind of the three main things that you would say would be your most kind of gratifying accomplishments? I can imagine STEMedia Incorporated would be one of
Oh,
them, but
absolutely, absolutely. STEM Media, with the help of others with similar passions, we launched a STEM Success Summit, a virtual summit that we actually launched before the pandemic and everything, and we were able
uh-huh.
to have our second annual last year in 2020, and we boasted over 2,000 attendees, an attendance rate in the 90s, and it was just like 90%, and it was just an awesome experience to be able to reach people, in 50 plus countries across
Mm,
several time zones, having speakers, 20 plus speakers of various STEM backgrounds. That's definitely one of the accomplishments. Since you mentioned that, I just had to go there first,
of course,
for sure.
it's a
I,
definite accomplishment.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think another thing for me is that my research area, when I was in graduate school studying for my PhD, I did research in the area of using composite materials that I mentioned earlier, FRP composites, to repair concrete structures. And this isn't something that I necessarily started, but it was an area that I got my dissertation in,
Okay.
really, and more particularly using it to repair and
Mhm.
monitoring the repair job, right? And I was able to do something that not every PhD can say, and that is use my research area in the real world within a
Mhm.
few years after my graduation. So here in my
Mhm.
current state, I have been able to play an active leading role in the designing of these FRP composites for the strengthening of actual in-service bridges.
That's
Not only that,
amazing.
had a hand in drafting a lot of the special provisions and guidelines for this particular work. And it was so gratifying for me because, again, I remember doing this in the lab and hearing people say, like, you're going to be one of only two people to ever read your dissertation and things of that nature. And I
Mm,
understand that sometimes research is, a ways away from where current practice is. But
yeah.
I felt it extremely gratifying to be able to see some of the things that I worked on in my
Mm,
educational career now show up and have a hand in it in my professional career. And so that is something else I
absolutely.
would say really gratifying.
No, definitely.
And I'll just conclude on a personal note. Being a father, being a husband and a father is definitely an extremely gratifying thing, I would
Absolutely.
say. You know, uh, Having wonderful baby girls, being
Mhm.
married to a wonderful woman is definitely up there and competes with anything that I can point out in
Mhm.
the technical career that I have.
That is phenomenal. Absolutely. There's so many different nuggets there. Definitely the family life and trying to especially where we are at the moment, trying to make sure that that work-life balance is something
Hmm.
that is actually absolutely dealt, you were able to handle, but also
Absolutely.
educational career and the way that you've been able to really mitigate your path in really complex areas has been fantastic. Um,
Yeah.
you mentioned your education actually, and obviously your dissertation and the research side of things.
Sure.
What I would like to know is, in terms of diversity, back
Hmm.
in the day when you was, doing you was at college and doing your PhD and that kind of thing, what did diversity look like? So, for instance, what was your experience of diversity inclusion within your area of STEM when you first started out? in
Yeah.
comparison to the conversations that are trending now? What does
Yes.
that look like
Yes.
to you, and how
So I
different is it?
started, yeah, that's a great question, Marlene. I started my educational, my higher educational journey at what we call a HBCU, a historically black college and
Hmm.
university down in Huntsville, Alabama, here in the States, known as Oakwood University. Now, HBCUs are predominantly black. And
Hmm.
so there's not an uncommon thing to have a black doctor here, a black scientist here, professor, intellect here that look like you, that you can relate to on a cultural level,
Yeah.
that you can almost look at as your uncle or your auntie, right? And so
Hmm.
that was an incredibly affirming environment in a world, in a society where that is not the norm. See, by default, in general society, I'm the minority, right? In the
Hmm.
United States, right? In this society where I live in, this nation that I live in, it I cannot avoid going places where I'm the only black
Hmm.
person, right? So
Hmm.
having an HBCU experience at the beginning of my higher education was incredibly, like I said, affirming. It helped me to know, who I was and not feel um, uncommon in my pursuits of higher ed and higher intelligence, right? But then after that, I actually transferred and did a dual degree, to be more specific. I enrolled in a dual degree program where I pursued my engineering degree specifically, doing applied math at the HBCU. My engineering degree was at a university down the road, which wasn't an HBCU. And so I went from,
Hmm.
classrooms where, almost everybody looked like me to a classroom where I'm looking around like, all right, I want to give somebody let me give somebody a head nod or something really quick, just to kind of, how we
The
do, right? When you
universal
go to
head
a place
nod.
and not many of us, and then you see somebody that's also black, you're like, oh, okay, what's up? You don't even know them, but it's like the
Yeah.
answer is like, I see you, brother. I see you, sis. I'm looking
Yeah.
for those over there, right? And
Yeah.
there were a few people who came from my background at that university, and it was a great experience for the most
Mm.
part, but nevertheless that mirrored the normal society and the
Yeah.
normal environments that I found myself in at the grocery stores or when I get my
Mhm.
car worked on, wherever, right? And
Mhm.
so then I had to really hold on to, hey, knowing who I was, not being intimidated or feeling like I
Mhm.
didn't belong,
Mhm.
reminding myself that I had what it takes. And yes, indeed, there were individuals even there that still supported and rallied around. I had to study groups that came. There were people who would look out here and there. And so that was really my experience from that point on. My
Yeah.
master's was like that. Certainly my PhD program. In fact, I remember even on my PhD program, and there's a lot of, what some people dub as microaggressions that I really could go into, to be very honest with
Mhm.
you. But I remember, just to say one thing, I was flat out asked in my PhD program, why am I getting a PhD? Because you all don't get PhDs. I was flat out asked that, Marlene, and that was a
Wow.
shock. But again,
Wow.
having a foundation of knowing who I was, and regardless of how I may be looked at, right, by
Mhm.
someone else, that allowed me to not let that cause me to sit back and say, you know what, why am I even doing this? I
Mhm.
don't see anybody else that looks like me doing this. Why am I even trying to do this? I was
Second
able to push
guessing.
past
Yeah.
that. I do want to acknowledge one other gentleman that I was able to. He was in my department, but he wasn't in my lab, so we would cross paths every now and then. One other black guy,
Mhm.
um, and there were a few other black women in some of the other programs in the department as well. But in my lab, in my particular area, the research that I was doing, I was definitely the only African American. But that didn't deter me, again, because of the foundation I feel like I had.
No, definitely. And I think when you mentioned HBCUs, my
Yeah.
first introduction in the UK, we don't have, unless something's happened within the last couple of months, we don't have anything like that, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
Um, so growing up and watching like different worlds, that kind of thing, it was just like,
Yeah.
what is that? Like everyone's black and they're at university. Like it was
Yeah.
really surreal. And then to realize that that was actually a thing was really,
Right.
really enlightening for me and my friends at the time, because we'd never seen anything like that. What we'd seen before, I mean, obviously, we had members of the family that went off to higher education and that kind of
Hmm.
thing,
Hmm.
but we were just like, is that what it's like then? Is that what it's like where there's so many Like we've got cousins and aunties and uncles and brothers and sisters going to university. Is it like that? They were like, no, it's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
like that here. So it's really great to know that there was that infrastructure in the States. Um,
absolutely.
and then, what that kind of leads on to my next question was in terms of diversity, inclusion, which we know has kind of loopholes in a way in terms of different perceptions of diversity and inclusion. And obviously the HBCUs has done a great job in making sure that, the underrepresented is represented. But in terms of that, like, how serious do you think STEM was outside of the HBCUs, obviously? STEM was taken as a priority in academia and also in the corporate sphere when it comes to diversity. Like you mentioned before just now that in the HBCU, there was many people that looked like you. So there was a commonality there.
Right,
As soon as
right.
you left that environment, it was a flip. It was a total opposite.
Yeah.
So in terms of diversity inclusion at that time, do you think, and obviously now today, do you think that that is something that really the academics and the companies are really doing anything about in terms of trying to make it the representation a little bit more fair?
Right. So, and this even ties into the history of HBCUs because of the history here in the States as it relates to, the slave trade and things like that. There
Mm-hmm.
have always been by name, um, programs and different things in place with the purpose or the intended purpose to increase diversity. Whether
Mm-hmm.
you want to talk about affirmative action or talk about other minority programs. Even when I was at NASA, not every year, for the most part, I was in a general program, but I worked alongside other people who were there also through minority, um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, uh, diversity and inclusion efforts. But
Mm-hmm.
I can say this for sure, just to be very honest. For the most part, it has always seemed to be something only a few people cared about,
Mm-hmm.
and other people felt like it was a burden.
Yeah.
A burden. I have to check this box, or man, I don't want to get caught by the diversity police. So let me try to do this, that, and the other. And things are never what they could be when that's the attitude that they're approached with, right? And so
Absolutely.
what ends up happening is, you get into an environment and you start sensing, okay, this person didn't really want me here. I'm helping them meet a quota,
Yeah.
I'm here really just for the pictures they put on the brochure. You know what I mean? When
Yeah.
it's time, when it's time to make a decision or they want feedback, they don't ever really look in my direction. So that
Mm-hmm.
has definitely been the case. Again, I do acknowledge that that hasn't been everyone's attitude, but
Mm-hmm.
absolutely that
Mm-hmm.
has been noticed in pretty much every environment that I've gone in under the guise or the intent to make it more diverse by at least someone. And so
Yeah.
that being the case, I think what needs to happen is a couple of things. I think more people need to, first of all, understand the history, right? Know that what we are living with now isn't
Mm-hmm.
what it's always been, and that there are still effects. There's still a legacy of discrimination. There's still a lot of things currently that we still
Mm-hmm.
deal with that are remnants of our past. No one's
Absolutely.
saying that we need to make that the only thing that we cry
Mm-hmm.
about or we focus
Mm-hmm.
about or anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's still a reality. It's still a factor.
Absolutely.
So I think people need to be
Mm-hmm.
educated on that. Two, I think people need to be more educated and more people need to have their eyes open to the actual value proposition of diversity, the
Mm-hmm.
actual value that comes from having people from different backgrounds in the room. I mean, there are a lot of comical uh, examples online that you can find where technology was designed for lighter skin tones and a darker skin tone isn't really even noticed, or
Mm-hmm.
it's basically constructed with the male in mind, not to think that perhaps a woman may want to use it, right? So just
Mm-hmm.
really having more diverse perspectives and diversity of thought in the room, which comes naturally when you have diverse cultures and diverse ethnic backgrounds. That value proposition, in fact, it's been proven that it actually increases the bottom line. It helps the bottom line by a number of studies that I have come across. And so those are two things I think that people have to become more knowledgeable about.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that I'm beginning to see a little change on, but nevertheless, um, it's still, I still think we have a ways to go to
Yeah,
where the majority of people, at least in practice, are aware of this.
absolutely. No, absolutely. And sometimes it feels as though, well, especially right now, it felt like the whole world kind of stopped, with the awful things that happened last year. Obviously, the murder of George Floyd, as well as numerous other awful situations that had occurred. And it felt like for once, everyone stopped. And for me, it didn't feel like that had ever happened before. You
Right.
know, being black, this is a skin you wear all day, every day. It
Right.
never changes. You wear it with pride. And it was just like, oh my God, all these people within all of these industries are actually talking about it. So
Yeah.
that for me was just like, okay, that's a step. But through conversations that we've had with colleagues, black and white, and non-black, it's been like, this seems like a bit of a trend. And I think that's what some people, kind of the underlying taste is like, is this a trend? Is this a wave that's going to be, we're going to be riding for a while? Or is it going to dub down like fashion and kind of rejuvenate itself in another, few years, that kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah. I do want to add, Marlene, if I may, really quick, that again, it is incredibly encouraging to have worked with some individuals that really internalize the need.
Mm,
Even before recent events, I would say that North Carolina State University, particularly the College of Engineering, is
mm,
led by a man, just to give him a shout out, Dean Louis Martin Vega, who has been always a champion for representation, for making sure that there is the inclusion as well as the diversity, because they're not necessarily the same thing. And then
mm,
I'll also go on to say that, my firm that I work, Simpson Engineers and Associates is led by African American male, and in a team of people who, make no bones about, our place in the industry. And so
mm,
I do want to acknowledge that in my um, personal journey, and I think this is so important, that we indeed look at the people who do get it, look at the people who actually do believe in the same causes that, our very existence
mm,
advocates, um, and really try to focus on them. Because if you start focusing on people that don't get it long enough, that can really break your spirit after a while. And we know there are plenty of people who don't get it, but you just can't let that be your only focus. Go
mm.
ahead and get recharged from the people who have that great positive energy for you, right? And continue to let that be the gas and the fuel for you to continue to be present and to continue to pull others into the space as well.
Absolutely. No, definitely. That's so key. And that actually leads on to the next thing, was like, what things would you like to see change within your area of STEM for the betterment of Black colleagues, obviously representation, and working with people that get it, that actually do want to make a difference. So this is like for the betterment of the your Black colleagues coming up in your area of STEM, the next generation, and how they can better navigate their careers.
Yeah. Well, being the founder of a media company, it almost goes without saying that I believe in the power of images, people actually
Mm,
seeing something, right? Because
mm,
everything starts with the vision. And believe it or not, a lot of young people who haven't seen something um, need a vision to borrow at first, right?
mhm,
They need to be
mhm,
able to see someone that they can relate to, that they can see themselves in doing something in the laboratory or doing something at a high level related to STEM or engineering, that allows them to start putting their head or their face on that person's body and start saying, wait a
mhm.
minute, I could do that too. Right. And so
Absolutely.
I want to continue to, and will continue to work to make these images plenteous across our digital landscape in my own personal community. Not only just, again, showing myself, but showing that I haven't lost anything about who I am as a Black man, showing
Yeah.
that just as much as
Yeah.
I like engineering and I have the ability to, run trick functions, I also like sports. I also like, hip hop music. Like there's still other things about my
Yeah.
culture that's still a part of me, even as I do these things that perhaps people haven't seen intersect
Mm,
much
yeah.
in their lives, right? So I definitely want to see more of that. I also think that there should be more information sharing, because here's the thing, like, you may know something that you don't know, then you Google it. I don't know this. Let me Google it. But then what if you don't know what you don't know?
Mm-hmm.
And then worse yet, I've heard someone even say the triple negative. What if a young person doesn't know that they don't know what they don't know? And
There
so
you
it
go.
literally takes people being proactive in
Mm-hmm.
piercing through a veil of ignorance. And I say ignorance because not as an insulting term, but that's technically what it is.
Absolutely.
Unawareness of certain worlds that do exist to say, hey, let me open your eyes to these possibilities. Let me share with you how a person gets government contracts. Let me share with you how a person even makes their business incorporated. Let me share with you
Mm-hmm.
the software that I use when I design this instead of letting it stay in this black box and
Mm-hmm.
assuming that, maybe they don't want to know. And maybe they
Exactly.
don't, but we can't always assume that because, again, there are people who have the potential. I really believe this, Marley. There are people who have the potential for like literally what's going to take us to the next level as a society, as a human race, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
they just don't know that
What they've
there's
got.
a world where that
Mm-hmm.
potential can be applied and activated. And so I would like to see more of
Absolutely.
that unlocked on every level, from the youth as well as to the professionals. There are people working in maybe one area of a business, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're working out at the construction site, but they actually have the ability to actually run the engineering firm. They just don't know how do you get there, how do you start. And so I would
Exactly.
like to see somebody actually reach out and say, hey, in a few years, you're really good at this, but you have the potential to actually create one of your firms as well. You could design this. You don't have to just follow the blueprint. You can actually produce those blueprints. And so I
Mm-hmm.
want to see those worlds crack open, because it's
Mm-hmm.
not only going to change the perception, it will actually change the reality, not just for Black people, but for the entire world.
Definitely. No, absolutely. And I think that is a really great point, because so many times we come across that same conversation not knowing. And it's
Yes.
true. If you don't know, you really don't know. If you don't have a situation or an environment that's opened up to you, then you're not going to know what your true potential is going to be. So yeah, it's a really valuable lesson. My next question actually was going to be, what advice would you give graduates that are entering your area? Because obviously, with where you are at the moment, you've accomplished so much. I was trying to do the math when you were saying 15 years ago, high school. I couldn't work it out, but I know you've done a lot in the
Yeah, I
time.
think my math is a little off, so we won't fact check that. We don't have to fact check it. We won't fact
No
check it too
worries.
hard, too closely.
But it just seems that you've done so much in when I was going through, obviously I do my research, I was just like, wow, there's been so many amazing achievements that you've done along the way, with obviously
Oh, thank you.
NASA, is huge, and obviously your own organization and the firm that you work with that you mentioned. There's so many different words of advice, but if you can give any words of advice that you can give, maybe your top five, maybe that you think that would
Okay,
really help someone come up, that would be awesome.
I'm glad you narrowed it down for me, because I'm like, man, how long you got?
As long as you
And
like.
yeah, yeah, and to be honest, like, just to be upfront, I mean, a lot of the advice that I pass on is advice that I've gotten. So
Hmm.
I'm not, all wise and all knowing that I've originated this all in my own head. But like, there are things that people have shared with me that I believe have worked for me that I also want to pass on. And one is, first, I would just start with, knowing who you are, like
Hmm.
being confident and secure in who you are as a person and who you're not, right? And that's not just on a spiritual level, though that may be helpful for people. I would say also know what you're good at, know what gives you energy, know what really, like, revs your engines, right? Who are you? And if there's something that's not you, don't try to force yourself to be something else. Just naturally who you are. The second thing I would say is really master your craft. When you have an opportunity to study something, when you have an opportunity to go through a curriculum or a program, take it seriously. It's not just a matter of getting through it. You're actually supposed to pick up skills that are now going to allow you to unlock doors on the other side of that. So you don't ever want to get into this habit of, hey, the teacher doesn't know that I'm just copying this person's paper. Let me just do it, right? Or I just want to turn this in because it's easy. I'm just going to do the same one I did last time. really make it your business to become excellent at the actual job you do. And that's a process too, right? There's still areas that I want to improve in. Um, Also,
Absolutely.
I would then say, make sure you know why you're doing what you're doing. Like, really try to find a reason beyond yourself. Um, yes, you have to know who you are, and you want to make sure that there's something that you want to do. You're not living your life for others, but you also want to make sure that you're looking to make an impact that outlives you. Right? I love one of my favorite quotes is the best investment in one's life is in something that will outlive it. And so find that why that goes beyond the lifespan that you have, because the truth of the matter is that, as we talked about earlier, the legacy, the impact of what happens or what happened continues to carry on into the lives of people, even when the people who initiated the action never are no longer around. So I would
Mm,
definitely say that as a third thing. Another piece of advice that I would go with is um, very practical: improve communication. Like, there's so many challenges that people go through
yeah.
and fight through simply because there was a miscommunication or there's a difficulty in understanding what that person meant and what
Hmm.
that other person heard. Right. And so when the better you can get at not just communicating on a one-to-one level, but even presenting, public speaking, the better you are able to transfer ideas to other people. And when more people get around giving ideas, whether it's a cause like diversity and inclusion, whether it's actually a technical innovative idea for a product, whatever it is, the more people can get around an idea, that's when change and momentum can actually begin to build. And so I definitely say improve communication as a practical tip, practical piece of advice. And let me see, I got one more slide, right, Marlene?
Yeah, go for it.
I
If
got
you've
one
got
more
more,
slide. Let's see.
by all means.
um, my last one I would say is get around people that help propel you towards where you want to go,
Mm,
not people who hold you back. And some people, when they hear that, they automatically think, well, I can't change my family. You're right, you can't change your family. All right, what if I'm already in this given relationship, whatever case may be? To the best of your ability, try to spend a lot of time
mm,
around people that are headed in the same direction as you, because there's so many people, Marlene. There's so many people that miss out on what they could have obtained really because of who they're around.
mhm,
You know, it,
mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's heartbreaking sometimes when you see potential in someone, um, and you see just like the opportunities begin to drain from their future because of default choices that are made by people around them. And so that is would definitely be my final piece of advice. If you're in a place where you don't have a lot of people, you may even say to hang around instead of where you're headed, get online and find the chat room of people that are talking
Absolutely.
about the stuff you want to talk about. Go to a YouTube channel, and if they put out videos every day, you watch it,
Yeah,
religiously, because that is in a sense hanging around them. And if worse come to
absolutely.
worse, pick up a book. Your
Hmm.
library itself can represent those people that you're hanging around. Those authors are the people you begin to hang around, at least mentally, to help you go where you need to go. And so that's what I'll conclude. I know I had a lot. You about to
No, that's
maybe do a
perfect.
keynote, but that's it. I'll stop there.
No, no, that's perfect. And I think surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals is yeah, it's definitely something that I see to be like a common theme in
Yeah,
terms of advice of the people that we've spoken to in and outside of this conversation. So many people saying the same thing. Communication again, things that you need to just go back to basics. Go back
yeah,
to basics and really look at the blueprint of where you want to go. So yeah, no, that was perfect. That was perfect. Thank you so much.
great.
Um, got a couple more questions for you, and feel free to, if there's something else that comes to mind, to throw it on in there. Um, you've mentioned before, like you've worked with some amazing people. Um, who are your role models? Feel free to shout them out. Absolutely. If you don't
I have
want
a
to, that's
lot of
fine.
role models.
But yeah, I
Yeah.
can imagine. Who are they, and how did they impact your career? You did mention some before, but how did they impact your career in terms of where you are now? And
Yeah.
also, what are your ambitions going forward? In your next phase of your career, I'm sure you're nowhere near holding back in terms of your career. What's the next phase for you?
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. So at the risk of leaving somebody off, which I'm sure I'll think of, when this is over. But I have to start with my parents.
Hmm.
You know, my mom, who's always really encouraged me. Back to the communication piece, she always encouraged me to speak. I mean, I feel like she would put situations where I had to go and speak to the teacher and explain myself if I got in trouble or whatever the case may be. And then my dad, who really introduced me just to the idea of engineering. I didn't even know what engineering was,
Hmm.
were it not for him. And in every part of my career, as I began to work, there there always seemed to be someone that took a special interest in me. I remember at NASA, um, uh, a physicist by the name of I'm sorry, Dr. Banks. Dr. Banks has been Dr. Curtis Banks was just a phenomenal mentor, and he really
Hmm.
cared about me. I often felt like he was really interesting because he was a NASA physicist, but he was also a pastor of a church. So
Wow.
he would work in the lab with me, and then on Sunday he would go preach to his congregation. And he really always came with a warm, and to this day, he's still a great mentor of mine. Another person I would definitely shout out is Miss Jennifer Simmons. She was the one who encouraged me, along with Dr. Banks, to go forward to get my PhD. She was working at NASA as well. She was in the
Hmm.
educational programs office. I'll say her. When I got to NC State, there were definitely people that took me under the wing. My advisors, Dr. Rudy Saraceno, Dr. Kara Peters, were two people. I already mentioned the dean of engineering, who I was able to
Hmm.
meet while I was there. Another phenomenal director of the minority engineering programs at NC State, Angelita Daniel, who was a phenomenal role model and mentor. And then I'll just conclude with saying also my current boss man, David Simpson, who is also the CEO and owner of Simpson Engineers and Associates, where I do a lot of my engineering work to this day. And so, yeah, I have a lot of people, and the list goes on and on, Marlene. But if you
Perfect.
were to ask me, what I like to see, I want to be what those people are to me for other people, right? And even if I'm not that person in a one-to-one direct basis, we can
Hmm.
touch. You can come to my office. I'm
Hmm.
trying to do it in this space where obviously virtual communication, a virtual digital presence,
Hmm.
can have just as much of an impact. And so I intend to increase visibility, not just of myself, but of other people like me, because at the end
Hmm.
of the day, a person may not relate to me, but they may relate to somebody else I can elevate. They may
Hmm.
relate to somebody else. A young lady may see me and say, "Yeah, okay, I really am inspired." But Marlene, she spoke, she's got a little differently, and I connected with that, right? And so I want to continue to elevate and inspire the
Hmm.
community, the STEM community in particular, in that way. And I really believe that's my purpose.
Absolutely. And that is great. And enabling to kind of giving back to the awesome work and time that your mentors have put into you to nurture your career,
Yes,
family included, and wanted to kind of dispel that is yeah that is great. I've got one last question
sure.
that I wanted to ask you about. Um, it's in terms of history. Um, the Black History Month is very different to, well, it's not very different, it's exactly the same thing, but we celebrate in October, and obviously you guys celebrate in February.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so it's just one of the questions that kind of filtered its way in is in terms of Black history, it's evident that history of Black inventions or kind of Black stories or Black innovation has been forgotten, or if not forgotten, just ignored. Do you have, or can you tell me of an inventor story um, that really resonates with you,
Hmm.
um, that you would like to share? It could be in your industry or outside of your industry.
Sure, sure. So of course, there are a lot that people know that come right off the top of their tongue when you ask a question like that. But two
Hmm.
people that come to mind that I am inspired by, one, a man by the name of Jerry Lawson. He
Hmm.
was dubbed the father of modern gaming. He worked with a lot of the early gaming systems, and his work, I believe, as electrical engineer, was really pivotal and something that is, I mean, look at gaming now.
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
mean, it's an industry. There are careers now that exist.
exactly.
There are billions and billions, yeah, even trillions of dollars that really came from that work. for people like Jerry Lawson. Another person I would say is Gladys West. I believe she was a mathematician,
Yeah.
and she had a hand in work in a lot of the coding and the software that went into our global positioning systems.
Mhm.
Right. So when you look at your Google Maps now, and you look at,
That's it.
the satellites that help us not just as a civilian, but like militarily, right? There are algorithms, there's work, there's coding, there's math involved in that
Mhm.
came from the work of the likes of Gladys West. And so
Mhm.
she is another person that is incredibly inspiring. And I say these two names because I think, one, it shows that they did a lot of they mastered their craft. They're good at what they do, and it
Mhm.
also suggests that sometimes the work and our biggest contribution may not necessarily be that I'm the founder and CEO of this, I'm the big
Yeah.
person, the face of something, but
Yeah.
I contribute a pivotal component to this thing that really launched a forest fire in a good way, of
Absolutely.
innovation and opportunity for so many people. And so
Mhm.
I'll stay with that. I'll say Jerry Lawson and Gladys West are two people I want to acknowledge.
No, that is great. No, that's yeah. We those two are phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Um, that's the end of my questions.
Oh wow,
I
yeah,
know it has
this is
gone
good.
so quickly. Oh my gosh, like thank you so much. This has been a fantastic conversation. I really do appreciate you
Thank
coming
you.
on board. Um, it's just a shame. It's such a shame that it's we've come to the end, but we will be definitely coming back in contact with you.
Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. But yes, thank you so much for jumping on board. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you for the opportunity, Marlene.
No worries. Thank you. Take care now.
Take care.